The shift is over. The environment is quiet, stable, and safe. Tonight's story continues in that same steady rhythm, slow, grounded, and easy to rest with. I still remember the taste of it before I knew what it was. It sat behind the tongue like old copper and hospital cleaner, a thin film that did not belong in the mouth. The suit's internal air was supposed to be dry, neutral, filtered twice through smart media that cost more than a year's pay. The readouts were green. The black box log wrote green lines into memory. I tasted copper anyway. We were on the polar side of the colony where the wind never stopped. The city was a refinery wrapped around a buried facility that wasn't on the civilian schematics. Above it, the lights always looked tired. Sodium haze smeared by sleet, warning strobes blinking through blowing grit. Under it, everything was steel ribs and insulated tunnels and old heat. The brief had been short and confident. A containment incident, a localized breach, a research stack collapse after a seismic pulse from a geothermal vent. Several technicians missing, presumed dead, automated doors sealed, internal suppression engaged. The orbital ring wanted us down there to confirm the seal, retrieve data cores, and burn anything that could leave the planet. It was framed like an after-action chore, a cleanup, something men like me got assigned when the command staff needed a job done without questions. I was the containment warrant attached to second drop, not a line officer, not a hero. I had a warrant because I could keep protocols intact when everyone else wanted to move faster. My job was to make sure the war stayed inside the walls. We staged at the service lock on the refinery's underside, where warm air leaked out through gaskets that had seen too many winters. The lock smelled like lubricant and disinfectant. My people wore sealed exosuits with overpressure masks, joint seals taped, smart filters fresh. They checked each other without talking. The only sounds were the soft clicks of clamps and the steady hiss of oxygen cycling. I ran my chem sniffer along the inner door seam. It reported nothing it could name. Unknown particulate count elevated but not classified. The system flagged it as industrial dust. Every time a machine says it does not know, someone decides that means it is safe. We went in. The first corridor sloped down through concrete lined with steel mesh. Condensation clung to the walls in beads and froze near the vents. A line of embedded lights pulsed pale blue, the colony's emergency color. My visor HUD drew a clean route in green based on orbital telemetry. It marked the hazard zone 2 levels below, contained behind sealed blast doors. The telemetry came from the facility's own sensors, streamed upward through the refinery network, then to orbit. It was supposed to be reliable because it was automatic. It was supposed to be free of fear. The comms were wrong from the start. Our squad net carried in fragments, a stuttering tone under the usual encrypted burst. The jammer icon blinked on my display, then off, like it could not decide if it wanted to exist. The line officer looked at me through his visor. I gave him the flat hand sign for continue. We were already inside the lock. Turning around would have been an admission that the facility could refuse us. We moved in a slow file. Exosuits made men heavy. Each step landed with a dull thud that traveled through the floor like a message. My hip clicked on every third step. I ignored it. Pain is a signal you can't afford when your job is to notice other signals. We reached the first junction where the civilian refinery tunnels forked away and the sealed stack access began. The architecture changed. The walls became smoother, darker, more expensive. The air temperature dropped and the humidity fell, like someone had decided moisture was a liability. A camera tracked us from a corner dome. Its lens followed with mechanical patience. The facility still had power. That meant it still had purpose. My chem sniffer began to show rising counts of organic volatiles. Not enough to trigger alarms, enough to sit at the edge of doubt. The suit's filter performance showed 98% efficiency. The black box wrote that down. We passed a panel where a technician had tried to override something. The casing was open, wires pulled. The display was cracked. A smear of dark fluid ran down the wall beside it and had frozen into a thin blade. I didn't stop to test it. I marked it in my log with a timestamp and a coordinate. My people saw it and kept walking. Veterans learn to leave mysteries behind until they can be processed safely. Curiosity is how you die in sealed places. The first sealed door was a blast gate with a colony crest stamped into it like a signature. It was locked, but the lock accepted our credentials immediately. That was the first real sign that the problem wasn't an accident. When institutions want to keep you out, they keep you out. When they want you in, they make it easy. The gate opened with a pressure sigh. The air on the other side tasted like that copper again, not stronger, just present, consistent, as if it had been there long enough to become part of the place. My visor HUD still showed green. We descended into the stacks. The facility beneath the refinery was built like a ship turned sideways, narrow corridors, redundant bulkheads, compartments designed to isolate failure. The floors were grated steel over service conduits. The walls were insulated panels behind which things hummed. The lighting was minimal, enough to see but not enough to feel comfortable. A place built for work, not for living. On the third level down, we found the first body. It was a technician in a soft suit, faceplate fogged from the inside. He had died with his hands on the floor grating, as if he had tried to pull himself forward. The suit's fabric had stiffened in the cold. There was a dark stain at the neck seal. I scanned him. My sniffers spiked, then settled. Organic volatiles high, particulate count high, no classified toxin signature. The facility still refused to name what was in the air. The line officer gestured to move past. We did. There was no time for ceremony. Bodies in containment zones are data points and hazards. You grieve later if you can afford it. The corridor ahead was marked as safe by telemetry. The safe corridor was where we lost our first Marine. His suit filter alarm chimed in my ear, a hard tone, then cut off. He took 2 more steps, then stopped. He raised a hand to his throat as if he could feel something through layers of composite and sealant. His posture changed, the small inward curl of a man who realizes his body has become the weak point. His visor fog. The overpressure system should have prevented external air from entering. Instead, the suit's internal pressure dropped 3 units in 2 seconds. A micro-leak, a seal failure, or something chewing through material faster than physics should allow. He dropped to one knee and stayed there. His fingers flexed against the glove material. I moved to him without thinking, my own hand already reaching for the seal foam canister. Then he coughed. The cough was muffled by the mask, but I saw the spray inside his faceplate, fine droplets that hung like mist. The suit's internal circulation kicked up, trying to clear it. That meant the filter media would ingest whatever had just come out of his lungs. In the space of a breath, he had become a dispersal device. I slammed my palm against his helmet latch and engaged the emergency isolation collar, a hard ring that seals the helmet system into a closed loop separate from the suit body. It is meant to preserve a person when a torso seal fails. In this case, it was meant to keep his breath from entering the rest of the corridor. The collar locked. The Marine's eyes were wide behind the fog. He tried to speak. No sound carried. The squad net was degraded. The only thing I heard was the hiss of my own oxygen. I pulled him back toward the last bulkhead. The line officer signaled to seal the safe corridor behind us. The blast gate began to close. The Marine convulsed once, hard enough that his helmet struck the floor grating. The fog inside his visor turned darker. The suit's internal pressure held steady after the collar engaged. That meant the leak was not from the outside. That meant the problem was inside him. I had seen chemical burns, radiation sickness, vacuum exposure. This was different. This was fast. His chest rose in short, jagged pulls. Something moved under the soft tissue of his throat like a swallow that would not complete. I strapped his wrists to the floor ring and marked him as contaminated. It felt like a betrayal. It was procedure. When we sealed the blast gate, we sealed him on the wrong side. That is the part that stays in my hands. Not the gunfire, not the bodies later. The simple motion of pressing a seal button while a man's eyes track you through fogged glass. Telemetry still showed green. We pulled back to the junction, and I forced a manual sensor sweep. I deployed 2 micro-drones the size of my thumb, each with a particulate sampler and a thermal camera. They floated forward on micro-impellers, their lights off, their feeds routed through my suit. The drones entered the safe corridor. Their particulate samplers climbed into ranges that should have triggered alarms days ago. The thermal feed showed something else, a faint shimmer in the air, as if heat was being displaced in patterns that did not match airflow. The drones reached the point where the Marine had gone down. His suit lay still. The helmet was fogged black now. The drone's cameras could not see his face. Then the shimmer thickened. The drone's feeds jittered. Their telemetry went flat. Their last image was a close view of the helmet seam where the isolation collar met the visor. There was a line of pale growth along the seal, like frost, except it moved. The drones died without impact. My sniffer finally named something. Not a toxin, not a chemical. A biological signature flagged as engineered protein aerosol, incompatible with the colony's known biosphere. The tag was partial, like a database entry cut in half. The rest was redacted. That was when I understood the truth had been decided long before we arrived. If the system has to redact the air, it has already chosen who will carry the blame. We reported up to orbit through the degraded net. Data packets went out in broken bursts. We received only a single return: continue mission, retrieve cores, seal deeper stacks. No mention of the Marine, no mention of unknown aerosol, no order to abort. Orders in a jammed net arrive like theology, stripped of context, delivered as absolute. We went deeper. The next levels were colder. The floor grating was slick with frozen condensate. The walls were dotted with manual shutoff valves and emergency phone dispensers. The facility had been designed by people who feared failures they could not control. We found more bodies, technicians and security personnel, some with suits, some without. The ones without suits had faces turned toward vents, mouths open as if trying to drink clean air. Their eyes were dry, not from freezing, but from being emptied. Their cheeks had a sunken tightness that did not fit the time window. In one alcove, a security officer lay against a panel with his sidearms still holstered. His hands were fused together by a pale crust that looked like salt until you saw it was textured like fungal mat. The mat had crept up his sleeves and into his collar. It had grown into the panel seam, like it wanted the circuitry. The facility's own suppression systems had engaged. I saw scorch marks where flame had licked walls and then stopped. I saw foam residue hardened into brittle shells. I saw vent shutters close tight. All of it had failed. At the core chamber, the blast doors were half closed as if something had interrupted their motion. A smear of dark fluid ran along the door track and had frozen. The gap between doors was less than a meter. Enough for a suit to squeeze through if you were willing to tear sealant. We should have cut and sealed, denied entry, called for orbital denial. That would have been the sane version. Instead, we had orders to retrieve. I crawled first. My suit scraped metal. My hip flared pain. The gap pressed against my pack. The seal foam canister caught on the track, and I had to twist hard to pull it through. I left a strip of composite on the door edge. The air on the other side was warmer, and that frightened me more than the cold. Warmth meant metabolism. The chamber was a lab built into the rock, walls lined with composite panels. Rows of containment cylinders stood along the far side, most shattered or empty. The floor was coated in a thin film that reflected our suit lights like oil. The film moved when we stepped, not like liquid, but like something elastic. My visor HUD flashed an overload, warning for particulate count. The suit filters adjusted, increasing flow. That meant more air through media. That meant faster saturation. We moved slow, guns up, but not firing. You do not shoot an aerosol. In the center of the chamber, a workstation held the data cores we had been ordered to retrieve. 2 black cylinders locked into a housing. The housing lights were still on. The system was still writing. Beside it lay the lead scientist. I did not know his name then. I only saw the collar tab on his lab undersuit and the way his body had folded in on itself. His head was turned to the side, cheek pressed into the moving film on the floor. His mouth was open, lips cracked. His eyes were half closed like sleep. The pale growth had taken him from the inside out. It had pushed through his nostrils and ear canals in thin threads. It did not look like fungus from Earth. It looked like structured material, deliberate, as if grown with intent. I stepped around him and reached for the core housing. My glove touched the housing latch, and the film on the floor pulled toward my boot like it recognized the movement. It thickened in strands that clung to suit joints. The line officer signaled to hurry. I unlocked the first core. It released with a magnetic snap into my pack. When I reached for the second, the chamber lights flickered. A low vibration ran through the floor, not seismic but mechanical. Somewhere above, a door actuator tried to cycle. The facility was responding to us, and it did not feel like assistance. My comms crackled with an orbital burst. A single packet came through clear enough to understand. Controlled burn authorized. Controlled burn meant flame sterilization through the vent system, flooding the stack levels with superheated oxidizer. It was supposed to happen early, before humans entered. Authorizing it now meant they were willing to burn us with the problem if necessary. The order arrived late. That was the pattern. I signaled for immediate retreat. No words, just hand signs the old way. My people began backing toward the half-closed blast doors. That was when the suppression systems fought the burn. The facility's foam dispensers triggered automatically, detecting heat rise in ducts. White foam erupted from ceiling slots and thick ropes, coating walls and floor. Foam is good for fire. Foam is bad for containment if it traps aerosol and then breaks apart later. The foam landed on the moving film, and the film reacted. It clacked. It pulled itself up into the foam like a mold-finding bread. It grew structure where there had been smear. It rose in ridges and columns, not fast like an animal, but steady, like a machine fulfilling a design. My suit alarm screamed filter saturation. The media was clogging. The overpressure dropped. The copper taste flooded my mouth. We moved, but movement became slow as the film and foam tangled around boots. My left leg dragged. The hip microfracture protested. I forced it anyway. Behind us, one Marine slipped. He went down hard, shoulder first. His suit elbow seal scraped the floor, and I saw the seal material peel back. His overpressure dropped. He inhaled reflexively, and that is all it takes. He did not scream. The suit mask muffled everything. He only went rigid, then began to tremor in small, fast waves. His visor fogged and then cleared in patches, as if something inside was consuming moisture. We could have dragged him. The corridor was already narrowing. The blast doors were half closed. Foam was filling space. Every second increased aerosol load. Dragging a contaminated suit would smear the thread across seals and joints. The line officer signaled to cut him loose. I did it. I disengaged his suit tether and sealed the connector. His body twitched once as we moved away. The pale growth began to show along his neck seal, a thin line like frost. There is no clean choice in a containment failure. There are only choices that delay spread. We squeezed back through the blast door gap. My pack caught again. I had to wrench it free, tearing another strip of composite from the door edge. That meant my suit had a weak point now. The HUD flagged a micro leak. The overpressure system compensated. It said the leak was manageable. A machine saying manageable is not comfort, it is a countdown. On the other side, the corridor was filling with fog foam vapor mixed with fine particulate. The lights flickered harder. Somewhere above, burned gas surged through vents, then cut off, then surged again as systems argued. We ran. Not fast, because exosuits do not sprint well in narrow corridors. It was a heavy urgency, boots slamming, shoulders scraping walls, breath loud in masks. In the safe corridor where we had sealed the first Marine, the blast gate alarm began to wail. The facility wanted to cycle it open, either a system error or something else. If that gate opened, the contaminated corridor would vent into our path. The line officer slapped the manual override, trying to hold it shut. The panel sparked. His glove smoked. The jammer icon on my HUD blinked steady now, as if someone had finally committed to interference. I pulled my plasma cutter and cut into the panel's seam. Sparks sprayed in brief white arcs. The air smelled like metal and ozone. Through my mask, I tasted copper and something sweet like rot. I severed the panel power feed and the alarm died. The blast gate stopped trying to move. For the moment, we controlled that door. Then the facility shook. Not an explosion. A deep, heavy jolt, like a mass shifting in rock. The geothermal vents below us were waking, or something in the lab chamber was expanding against constraints. The floor grating rattled. Dust fell from seams. The lights went out entirely for 3 heartbeats. In the dark, my suit systems hummed louder, compensating. I heard the thin hiss of air leaking somewhere. I could not tell if it was mine. The lights returned in red emergency mode. Red made everything look like meat. We reached the service lock where we had entered. The lock cycles were slow because they were designed to prevent pressure shock and contamination crossover. Slow cycles get people killed when air is poison. I keyed emergency cycle. The lock began to seal. The outer door clanged shut behind us. The inner door held. The lock's decon nozzles activated, spraying disinfectant mist. The mist hit my visor and ran down in rivulets, distorting vision. The disinfectant smelled like hospitals. It did not smell like salvation. My filter performance dropped to 62%. The suit flagged media replacement. I had no replacement inside the lock. The spare canisters were outside in clean staging. We waited through the cycle, standing in a fog of disinfectant and breath. No one spoke. We listened to our own oxygen and the distant thuds of facility systems failing. When the inner door opened, the staging bay air hit my mask like a different world. Warm, dry, slightly oily from refinery machinery, clean enough to taste nothing. We moved into the staging bay and sealed the door behind us. I engaged quarantine markers on all suits. That meant no one removed helmets until decon was complete. That meant everyone stayed inside their own breath. Orbital Command sent a new packet. This one came through clearer, like they had shifted frequencies. It carried orders for immediate quarantine of our unit and a follow-on denial strike plan. They did not ask for our casualty count. They did not ask what we had seen. They asked for confirmation that the data cores were secured. I confirmed. The black box confirmed. We were still useful. The denial strike plan was orbital fire directed into the stacks to vitrify the rock and seal the facility permanently. It would kill anything inside. It would also aerosolize any remaining contamination if done wrong. I sent a caution note through the log system: burn gas and foam conflict, risk of dispersal. No response. We were moved to an isolation module on the orbital ring, a place built for prisoners and infected. The corridor there was white and bright and smelled like bleach. My suit was stripped by robotic arms while I stood inside a clear chamber. The robots cut seals, peeled composite, bagged everything in triple layers. The air in the chamber was thin and cold. I shivered without my suit, body remembering vulnerability. They scanned my lungs. They scanned my blood. They scanned my skin. They said the results were inconclusive. Inconclusive is another form of countdown. They put me in a cell with a cot and a vent that hummed. The vent airflow was steady. I could hear it at night. It sounded like a patient animal breathing through a narrow throat. Days passed. The orbital ring rotated. The colony below became a sealed red dot on the external monitors. Then the tribunal began. They did not call it a tribunal. They called it a procedural review, a technical inquiry, words designed to sound clean. I was taken to a room with a table bolted to the floor, a camera in the corner, a recorder on the table. No one sat across from me. The questions came through a speaker in the ceiling, filtered, anonymous. That made it easier for them to be cruel without being personal. They asked about protocol adherence, filter checks, seal integrity, why I authorized entry through a half-closed blast door, why I retrieved cores instead of ordering immediate denial. They asked as if those decisions had been mine alone. I answered with timestamps. I gave them the log chain. Initial telemetry green, comms degraded, orders to continue, orders to retrieve, burn authorization arriving late, suppression systems conflicting, jammer icon active, panel override attempts, plasma cut. I spoke slowly, flat, no anger in voice because anger becomes a weapon they can label as instability. They asked again, differently phrased, looking for a crack. I understood the performance. They did not want the chain. They wanted a single link they could break and hold up as proof of accountability. They wanted a person whose title fit the failure. Containment warrant is a convenient shape for blame. In the days between sessions, they kept me isolated. No contact with my unit. No news from the colony. Only internal summaries broadcast on the Ring's information channel. Incident contained, denial strike successful, spread prevented, tragedy due to procedural breach under investigation. Procedural breach, singular, clean. I kept a separate black box logger inside my suit pack. It was unauthorized. It recorded raw sensor feeds before they were routed through facility redaction filters. It recorded the moment my sniffer database tag came back cut in half. It recorded the jammer icon blinking steady. It recorded the particulate counts that should have been alarms days earlier. I did not tell them about it at first. Keeping a secret like that is survival, and I had learned survival in places where truth gets people killed. Then they brought the scientist's name into the questions. They framed him as the lead responsible party. They described him as ambitious, compromised, politically aligned. They said he had falsified reports. They said his death did not absolve him. They said the failure lay in his lab and in my field decision to breach. They were building a narrative with 2 dead men and 1 living one. The dead men could not dispute. The living one could be punished. I watched the pattern and felt nothing on my face. Inside, something tight and cold moved behind the ribs. The scientist had been dead when I found him, but the facility housing had still been writing. The contamination had not been a surprise to the system. It had been managed until it wasn't. And when it wasn't, the system had delayed burn orders, delayed evacuation, kept telemetry green, and then asked us to walk into it. The real crime was not a breach. It was a decision to preserve the appearance of control until control became impossible. On the final session, they asked for a sworn statement acknowledging my responsibility for entering the lab chamber and retrieving cores despite contamination risk. They wanted the confession because confessions are easy to file. They become official truth. I sat in the room with the camera lens watching like a cold eye. I placed the unauthorized black box on the table. The speaker in the ceiling went silent for a long time. I could hear the hum of ventilation and my own breathing. I stated, for the record, that I had violated protocol by carrying an unauthorized logger. I stated that I did it because official telemetry had been unreliable in prior operations, and I no longer trusted summaries. I stated that the logger contained raw feeds that contradicted the facility's safe readings and showed evidence of active comms interference and redaction. I stated that the order chain had directed us to retrieve cores despite degraded comms and unknown aerosol indicators. I stated that burn authorization arrived only after entry, and that suppression systems fought the burn, suggesting internal automation conflicts known to facility designers. I stated that the contamination signature had been flagged as engineered protein aerosol with redacted metadata, indicating prior classification and prior knowledge. I kept my voice even. I did not accuse by name. I did not need names. The system understands implication when it can see timestamps. That was my controlled self-destruction. The speaker voice returned, different now, tighter. It asked me if I understood the consequences of introducing unauthorized material into a controlled review. It asked if I understood that my actions constituted sabotage of procedure. I stated that procedure without truth is sabotage of life. It was the closest thing to philosophy I allowed myself, and I regretted it immediately. They could file it as rhetoric. I corrected myself and restated in operational terms. Unreliable telemetry led to incorrect risk assessment, resulting in preventable loss of personnel and potential spread. Raw feeds demonstrate that unreliability. That is the operational fact. They ended the session without dismissal. 2 guards in sealed masks entered and took the black box without touching it, using a sterilized tray. They escorted me back to isolation. The next day, the Ring's information channel broadcast a new summary. Review complete. Responsibility identified. Reforms pending. They did not mention my black box. They did not mention redaction. They said a containment warrant had violated protocol, compromising safety. My name did not appear on the channel. It appeared in internal orders. I was stripped of warrant status. Rank reduced to nothing. Access revoked. Identity erased from unit rosters. It is a clean way to kill someone without blood. They scheduled me for medical disposition due to inconclusive contamination markers. Medical disposition is another clean word. In the holding clinic, a medic drone scanned my lungs again. It did not speak. It did not need to. The scan showed faint branching shadows in the lower lobes like frost patterns on glass. The algorithm flagged them as non-human structure. Early phase. I had been compromised in the lab chamber when my suit tore against the blast door edge. The micro leak had been manageable. Manageable had been a countdown. They put me in a final isolation pod with a recorder and told me to give a personal statement for archival purposes. No one said that it would be public. No one had to. Archives leak when systems rot. I began to speak into the recorder because silence is how they win completely. I described the operation again, slow, factual, without melodrama. I described the safe corridor that wasn't safe, the Marine's fogging visor, the drones dying, the redacted biotag, the foam fighting the burn, the late orders, the way the facility tried to open a sealed gate. As I spoke, my chest tightened. Breathing became work. Each inhale felt like drawing air through wet cloth. The copper taste returned, stronger now, mixed with something sweet and decayed. I felt movement under the sternum. Small, persistent, like something flexing against soft tissue. It did not hurt sharply. It hurt like pressure, like swelling, like a foreign plan unfolding. I kept my voice level and continued, because if I stopped, all that would remain would be their summary. I spoke about the tribunal without calling it that. About anonymous questions. About the search for a single breach to hold up as proof. About the need for a scapegoat so the institution could survive intact. My vision narrowed at the edges. The pod's light looked too bright. The airflow vent on the wall hissed, steady, patient, indifferent. It sounded like the facility below breathing through a crack. I realized then that the weapon did not need to spread widely to win. It only needed to turn systems against their own people. It only needed to make humans lie to preserve control, and to make the truth expensive enough that most would refuse it. I did not say that into the recorder. It would sound like meaning. They would call it narrative. They would file it under emotion. Instead, I stated the final operational fact. The failure was layered, not singular. Decisions made before the breach shaped the casualties more than anything I did on the ground. Telemetry was manipulated or compromised. Orders were delayed. Containment measures conflicted. The system chose appearance over accuracy until accuracy became impossible. My lungs rattled. The sound was inside the mask of my face even without a mask, a wet clicking, like foam expanding in a confined space. I kept speaking because breath is temporary. I stated that the records existed, that logs could not be fully contained forever, that the raw feeds would surface through maintenance backups, through copied archives, through the small leaks that happen when too many people touch a secret. I did not say justice. I did not say reform. Those words belong to people who believe in outcomes. I said only that the truth had weight, and weight makes its own way downward. When I finished, I stopped the recorder and sat back against the pod wall. The copper taste filled my mouth so completely it felt like metal plating my tongue. I swallowed and felt resistance in the throat, as if the passage had narrowed. I listened to the vent hiss. On the other side of the pod wall, someone walked past. Their steps were soft. The colony ring continued its rotation. Somewhere below, the polar refinery lights blinked through sleet over a buried glassed tomb. The last thing I remember clearly is the sound of air through a filter, thin and patient, and the awareness that the machine I had tried to fight would outlive me, but not the records. It could not stop copying itself into the world. Then the vent hiss became the only sound. The end. The narrative powers down completely. Everything essential stays on, everything else fades away. You're safe to sleep now.